Meeting of the Levy County School Board will now come to order. Would you please stand in favor? Our Father God, we come to you at this time giving thanks for all the many blessings that you afford us, the opportunity at this time to meet and make decisions that are in the best interest of the Levy County school system. We also come to you this morning with a bit of a heavy heart in that you've chosen to take one of our comrades to be by your side. We know he's there with you this morning, making sure that the chair and other board members do what they're supposed to be doing. For that, we give you our thanks as well. We ask these in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. We'd also like to allow before the pledge a few moments of silence, recognition of Mr. Phil Bott not being here with us this morning. Thank you, and will you now recite the pledge with me? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You see. Before we adopt the agenda, for good cause, I would request that it be amended as follows. After E6, which is the 2015-16 official school calendar early release days, insert F, board ratification of the contract language and compensation package.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend the agenda. Any discussion? Not all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign, motion carries. This time we would like to welcome any visitors that are amongst us that are not on the agenda and allow that this is the appropriate moment for you to speak. Seeing none, and we remind the visitor that we are going to have speaking is that she is not on payroll at this time. So that school board attorney David Delaney to give us information.
Sure. The issue comes up of where does the board go next regarding the very large shoes that need to be filled on Mr. Philpott. There's a Florida statute on point 1001.38, which says that all vacancies on district school boards shall be filled by appointment of the governor. So this is not a special election situation. Spoken with some other school board attorneys. They said that the protocol for that would be for the board chair to write to the governor, alerting him that we do have a vacancy on the board that the governor needs to appoint. I have done some research, and it appears to me, from what I've reviewed so far, that the appointment by the governor would be for the remainder of the term, not until the next election. There's a little bit of dispute on that. I'm working through that to try to get a definitive answer. There's actually someone who has an appointments office in Governor Scott's staff, so I'm going to be in touch with them over the course of the day to get a definitive answer on that. I'll have to assist the chair if you'd like on the format of the letter what needs to be in there.
My research on that is that it would be through the remainder of the term, because if they did it to the next election, then it would balance off. Now we have, 2-year cycles, 3 board members being elected, and then the next 2 years, 2 board members and the superintendent. So if you mess that up, then you would have just 2 board members, and the next time you'd have 4 people up for election. So that's the reason they like to keep it to the end of the term and not just to the next election.
Well, my research, that I was just looking into it, but I thought that appointments were for 2 years, and then it would be a special election, and then that other board member would have to run again in their regular cycle.
Not for
So,
board-
but not for school
Not
board?
for school board.
Oh, okay.
Now, it is also my understanding that the governor has no timetable.
That's a good point. explained, that's some of
Yeah.
the feedback I've gotten from some other attorneys that it is not something you need to be waiting by the mailbox every day for that letter to come to me.
Any other questions, comments to
Mr. Clemens, how long did it take you to get this? You guys about a year?
Several months, yeah, it was a pretty extended period.
Cameron, it was probably about 3 months for you.
About that time we decided we wasn't going to do it, but, like 3.5.
I think it's from November to March or something.
How long that was, that was 5.
But then we went 4 years without him appointing a county commissioner, so,
Right, Lincoln County Commission, that was forever.
yeah. We went up for 4 months and they did one like we served with 4 county commissioners for 4 years.
who did it indicate that the governor contacted the superintendent's office?
I have been in contact with the appointment office, and Pam's been doing emails for me, and I have an email train to that effect, but, yeah, in fact, we just contacted them just the evening, and they said, at this time, I was not to do anything but to wait on an executive order from the governor creating, the deed bill. I'll read it to you, this is. It is not necessary at this time for Superintendent Hastings to do anything in regards to the vacancy. We are just waiting on our legal office to create a vacancy by executive order. Once this is complete, we will let you know any, recommendations, so on and so forth. That's basically where we're at. Just waiting on the governor to officially make it open.
Thank you for that. At this point in time, I need to back up because I get myself. Go ahead, we leave that. D, Levy County District Testing, says here, Barb Candy Academy.
Good morning, Board, Mr. Hastings.
Morning.
This morning, last month, Valerie talked about the state assessment and the process and her being the coordinator of that. This time, we're going to explain the Lee County District DOCs based on our requirements. Originally, it came from Senate Bill 736, which is aligned to the race to the top language. And I'm going to read the next couple slides, and then from there I will not be doing so. But that Senate Bill 736 said performance of students, at least 50% of a performance evaluation must be based upon data and indicators of student learning. Growth assessed annually by statewide assessments or for subjects and grade levels not measured by statewide assessments, by school district assessments as provided in section 1008.22. And 1008.22 says, except for those subjects and grade levels measured under the statewide standardized assessment program beginning with the 2015 school year, each school district shall administer for each course offered in the district a local assessment that measures student mastery of course content at the necessary level of rigor for the course. As adopted pursuant to State Board of Education rule, course content is set forth in the state standards required by section 1003.41. And in the course description, local assessments may include, we have the FSA and the state DOCs. Other standardized assessments, including nationally recognized standardized assessments, we use the AP tests. We also use SAT-10 for K2. We have our industry certification assessments. And this year, we have the district developed or district selected end of course assessments. We also, the option is for teacher selected or principal selected assessments, but our really focus right now is being the initial year is district developed. A lot of that has to do with the equity. We look at what they're required for the teachers at FSA. We want to make sure, kicking this off, that we're as equitable as possible with our assessments as well.
Before you move on, under these district developed, this included input from classroom teachers.
Definitely, and Kathy's gonna go over the process
Okay, I'm
of
sorry.
of-
Never mind.
of what they do, and then I will also be readdressing it. And then at this point, Kathy's gonna speak to her section.
I apologize.
Thank you for allowing us to segue to my section. This process started last spring. What the district instructional team did, looking forward to what we knew our work would be this spring, is we looked at our course code directory, and we tried to streamline it in that we saw that some schools were offering theater, some drama. And we knew, are there similarities between these courses? Can we offer the same course across the district so that our teachers can work with one set of standards and have one EOC? Because Barb will tell you, we are in the process of creating 91 assessments. And if we had a drama in the theater, that would mean 92. So we tried to streamline what we were offering in the process. We met with the principals, we met with the data clerks, we said, can we live with this course code directory? And that was our first step. So students enrolled in our directory, and then over the summer, every teaching corps for every subject came in and were trained on how to develop an end-of-course assessment. So we created a blueprint template. We took the course description from the CPLUM site, the state site. We put it into a template, and we told each team that's teaching the course, we said, please tell us what you want on your end-of-course test. So they went through the standards, they prioritized. I worked with the pre-calc team. Said, okay, if you're creating your end-of-course assessment for your evaluation, which standards do you think are the most, should be on the EOC? And so they were trained on picking the correct complexity of the items. They said, we want this standard, we want one low complexity question. We want this standard, we want two moderate complexity questions. So they outlined how many questions they wanted on the test and what level of rigor. We guided them in our training to marry the FSA. We wanted somewhere between 40 to 60 questions if we could. We wanted 10 to 20% to be low complexity, 10 to 20 to be high, and the rest to be moderate. Because that's how our current FSAs are built for every other teacher getting a state test. So we tried to mirror that. We said create a test that would take no longer than 2 hours to give. And then as the grade levels worked through, if they were more elementary, they made shorter tests for the students' benefit. If they were secondary, they made something that would fit more into an exam period. So they created those blueprints. They were given a copy of those blueprints. They're posted on our curriculum map site. So starting school, every teacher knew, here's what's going to be on my EOC if I don't have a state EOC. And then the ones who had a state EOC got a test design from the state. Questions about that? Okay. All right. So that was our summer work. And then what's happened this school year? The teachers are teaching from their course standards. They're teaching with their EOC blueprint in mind. And then the district instructional team has been working all year on building the test. Our teachers trust us to use item banks that are secure and to create tests that marry their blueprints. And that's what we've been trying to do. We did roll out, was it 18, Barb, that semester? We rolled out 18 EOCs, and we've got the rest to roll out this year. So the district instructional team has met several times just to make sure who's creating what test for what course. And Barb will outline that a little bit more. And then we're involved in some partnerships that are helping us. Let me explain just a little bit about what the CFAC partnership has done. I've represented our district at CFAC meetings. This is the Central Florida Assessment Consortium. 3 years ago, when we knew this was coming down to us, we knew the state was going to give us items for certain subjects. We knew the state was not going to give us test items for most of the subjects we teach. So a grassroots effort was formed. Districts got together and said, we're going to need CTE items. We're going to need trigonometry items. We're going to need health science items. So CFAC got together and said, well, let's create them and then share the items with other people. And Levy County was given an assignment. We partnered with CFAC, And it's based on your school population. So our assignment was to write 26 items for the things we had content specialists for, to review 100 items that other people wrote. And in exchange for that amount of work, we would get all of the items created all over the state by the other partners. And so we did fulfill our obligation last spring. We wrote 42 items. We were even in the public beyond this room. We wrote more than were required. We wrote 42 items. We reviewed 117. And in exchange, we've gotten 18,000 items for our submission of 42. And so those...
Is there 40 districts involved in CFAC?
There were, and then it's increased to almost every district in the state. Every district in the state was realizing if we join this partnership, these people will share all of the items. So it's been upwards of 60.
Okay.
But it started small. Chris?
When you say an item, explain what an item is. Is that one question?
It's one
Is that-
question.
Okay.
It's one question. So CFAC prioritized and said, what are the top courses you're going to need items for? And they tried to write 200 to 250 test questions per course. And so that's what we have access to. Any other questions?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. So we have access to items through the CFAC partnership, and then the partnership said, okay, there are some districts that are very small, and you may not have a district staff person who's a specialist, say, in music, or a specialist in PE, or a specialist in building science, although we got Carol. So the CFAC district said, okay, now that we've got district people, let's let district people put together some of these tests so people will feel comfortable that they are administering a quality test, and that your math test is not put together by, whoever works in the district office. It may not be a math major. So CFAC has also been sharing tests that are put together, and that's ongoing work. Barb and Michael are our representatives to the NEFAC ESC cadre, and NEFAC's doing the same thing. They're putting together content area experts to write some whole tests. And that's where we are now. We're making a list of every test we have to have, and we're making sure that we are pulling items from the item bank and creating the full one test, built on what the teachers wanted on that.
For these item banks, will the rest of them, though, that we have access to be available to the teachers to use, like for practicing and exposing the...
Well, Barb can speak to that, and I'll share that the items are tiered. There are some that are reserved for district use to make EOCs, and then there are some that we have pushed out to teachers for them to use with students. Because we want to keep some secure. This is, we want to maintain security, and Barb will talk about the security agreement we've drafted. But we've tried to push as many out to them as we can, and then reserve enough that we don't have enough to make our test. There's more, but I'll leave it at that. I do want to say this, and Barb's going to talk about it. As we're developing these 91 tests, it does take us about 10 to 12 hours to do one. So that's a workload that we've taken on that's added to our other responsibilities.
And yes, we do work with an EFEC cadre, and that's 10 of the 15 districts are part of that group. And we've got myself, Michael, and Patrick involved in that. And we actually, and I'll show you right here, we've got this work here, this workflow, and it basically shows you a table of how we create the exams. We've got every course in here, and then I color-coded them so we would know which ones that are pink we have the developed test for. If it's got purple to the side, that means we've got a CFAC test created. And what we do with the CFAC test is, yes, we'll take the test, but if we look out there at it and it doesn't match our blueprint, some of the standards are on the CFAC test that aren't on the Lee County blueprint, then we take those items out. And if we need to add items, we do likewise. Yellow means it's teacher-made, and actually we have only a couple that are teacher-made, and that's because the teacher that's doing it has a standalone course, but also she is one of the item writers for the state, for the item bank. So, in fact, when we were doing the band one, I was meeting with the band group, she recognized some of her questions. So, She's actually been awarded another, they got another grant, she's been awarded another contract to do more items for the state, and that's Michelle Barber at Bronson Middle High. We've got blue, that means that those courses aren't currently active in our district, so that's an assessment we don't have to create. Green is FSA, and then the gray with red is usually reserved for our AP courses. So we've got this, it's several pages long, but it's for every course in our district. So we can track as we write tests, and I can make notes if the test is completed, and we can move on to the next one. Our resources are item banks, which Kathy explained about, CFAC. We also have the item bank test platform from the state. Again, they use teachers and contract with teachers to write items. We've been using that. And then we have test platforms, which is IBTP and Unified for Performance Matters. And Performance Matters has uploaded the CFAC items, the IBT items, and going back to what your question is, we also purchased the Florida Assessment Bank, which the teachers are using. And that was for Kimberly Bishop, who kind of spearheaded that for us. And so we've trained groups on Unify, and we've got some actively creating those assessments. They're short assessments, usually following up, teaching a unit or teaching a standard that they really want to assess and make sure the kids truly have gotten. IBTP also has teacher items. They are more performance-based type questions, and so they've been, many of them have been trained on that as well. Test management, like Valerie, there are test management things we have to do to secure these. First of all, I don't know, I've talked to you all before about roster verification that the state does, that by statute, teachers are able to view their rosters and request removal of students that aren't theirs. Well, we also have to do that for the district assessments as well. I'll be rolling that out in April using Performance Matters, because a teacher can look at her class and pick by course each class, and then I've created a form that they can request that student to be removed and indicating the reason why. So we'll be doing that process before the students even take the test. So when we get the data, we know which students to remove, so it doesn't count for that teacher. We've got printing to do of the assessments, and we have storage, which we have at Old Hilltop. We've got a room there, and we've got tons of storage bins to start putting these tests in once they get printed. And then we work with Brandon on the distribution. We have a test window. He knows to drop them off at the school, and then he's given a time when he picks them up from the school. The test security, we have a test security guide and an administrative guide, and it's in the same document, and the teachers read through it and understand how to administer the test security. Very similar to what they see with the FSA test and what they used to see with the FCAT. I did hear a district use SurveyMonkey, and Ron doesn't know this yet, but I'm going to sit down with him to see if we can do likewise, just because they can read it and they can click an agreement. And that way, we're not having to keep up with paper. We have it digitally, and we're not worried about losing any of them or not getting them. Post-test activities is scanning and scoring. We have Performance Matters printer scanners at the schools, so they will, I've got different, I call them Performance Matters contacts at each school. Some have a couple where they will scan the assessments in, and 24 hours later, the scores will be sitting in Performance Matters. So then we can get the data for the students and the teachers in this manner. And at this point, Candy is going to go over the teacher evaluation.
Ms. Barb,
Yes.
on our EOCs that we're developing, are they primarily paper-based or are they computer-based?
Right now, they're paper-based. If I go computer, well, I'm actually working, Ron and I went to an Excel training last week on how to develop the passwords and such with Performance Matters. But if I do it, it's going to be at the younger grades, because the high schools hit from now until the end of the year testing, and their labs also have to support the CTE type courses that need the labs as well. So it's going to be starting on the other end.
All right, you're going to see some of our, these are rough sheets that you'll see to begin with. A little bit of PowerPoint that looks like this. On the back side, Mr. Rick, if you'll flip that over, next step is your last page, so it'll look like this. At the very beginning of the school year, we sit down with our principals. I know it's small on the screen here, but this is actually a copy of class schedules that you'll see at a high school level. And what we do is we have a small team here at the district office. We pull the principal in and face-to-face, we sit down and look at the teacher's schedule and determine what amount of time are they spending in certain courses. And we develop their evaluation, their student growth portion or performance portion based upon the classes that they teach. So for example, if you look at your paper, you'll notice that we have on the second teacher, 20% of their evaluation will be based on Algebra 1 and 8% will be based on math, and that's the AIR or the FSA. So we determine that based on what, it's going to be an end-of-course exam, is it a state end-of-course exam, is it a district-made end-of-course exam? You'll see down here at the bottom it says District DOC, but every teacher, we look at every teacher and determine based upon their schedule what will be the most fair and equitable way to get student performance data. So if you'll take a look at the next page, the principals go back to the school, and they have a conference with every teacher, and they let them know this is how you will be evaluated. Now this is a conversation. There are times that the teacher will say, is it possible for me to be evaluated this way? And they may have a very valid reason for that. We get emails back and forth between the principals and myself and Barb, and we talk about it. And if that's the agreement that we're going with, they seal it with this letter. You'll notice towards the bottom, it shows the calculation, because the evaluation on the student growth portion is really an average of years for them. It's not a snapshot of this year only on their evaluation, unless that's the only data that they have. But by state statute, they say up to 3 years of data. So some will have 1 year, some will have 2 years, some will have 3 years of data. And so it lets them know that it's going to be an average. One of the things that we've created is a database where we can store the information, because we have so many teachers. Some may get 3 different tests that we're looking at and pulling data for them. Some may be just 1, but we have to be able to tell Barb in an easy way which test to pull by which teacher, so she knows that she's pulling the correct data for us. So we've created an access file. Tammy Wayne is responsible for that in my department, where we can pull it up if we need to know how many teachers will be getting the EOC for Algebra 1, and we need to make sure we pull that data. We can pull a report and we'll get every teacher's name. So that is our safeguard, and hoping that we can get every teacher the first round when we pull information. In the meantime, the principals are going through working on classroom walkthroughs, observations, formal observations, and they go through their initial evaluation with the teachers, excluding the student growth portion. And you'll see a copy of the first half of the teacher evaluation up here. You'll notice that we have domains 1, 2, 3, and 4 from the Danielson model. And that's pre-populated and sent to us, so we know that each teacher has had an evaluation based on just those performance areas in the classroom. In the meantime, we're still teaching and working on the data that's going to be gathered at the end. Once the test starts coming in, Barb starts pulling information. She will do transformation scores, and then we calculate everything on a spreadsheet. You'll notice in this column here, of course all of these, I probably should have picked a different column that will show some teachers, well here's one with 60-40. Some teachers won't have 3 years of data, and so their student growth portion will only be worth 40% of their evaluation instead of 50%. Once they hit 3 years of data, then they will have a 50-50 split. The domains would be worth 50%, and then the student growth will be worth 50%. We take a look at their raw average, or their raw score, on student growth for the 3 years prior, the next year, and then we plug in the current year, and then we run an average. Over here, this is where we put the notes of this is how the teacher scored on this particular exam, this is how they scored on this exam, and then that's how we show the math of how we have calculated the student growth or the performance score for that year. So the principals can use that information in plugging into the evaluation. It becomes a little more complicated. This is the bottom of a note page at a high school level, because high school principals have all of these tests running underneath them. And it's not just about the teachers at the school, but it's also about the administrators, and so they're evaluated as well. So we look at the data on the state assessments and we average that. We look at the data on the district EOCs, industry certs, AP courses, and we calculate it. This is also an agreement at the beginning of the year with the principals on how their evaluation will fall out. Everything is calculated and then put into their evaluation as well. The next step, once the principals receive their spreadsheet that has all of the information that we referred to earlier, they will go in, they will fill out a form that is attached to the teacher evaluation. This actually happens in the fall because we get our test results back so late. It happens at the very beginning of the school year. Actually, the thing that holds us up the most are the state tests when they come in. State tests and AP test scores come in later. So once those are in, the information is given to the principals. They remind the teachers at the very top what percentage of their evaluation is based on which tests, and then they show them the math of how that would be calculated to get their student growth score. And then the next step is for them to go back to their electronic form, and you'll notice here, this is the domains 1 through 4, and it's automatically calculated for them. If a teacher scored effective here, it's already going to put the weight for the principals, and it will tally everything here. Once the principal plugs in the student growth proficiency score, which they get on their spreadsheet, it will automatically calculate down here. There are different spreadsheets. Some will have, this is a 60-40 spreadsheet, because this is for a teacher that has less than 2 years or 2 years or less data. Or if it was 3 or more years, then the principal would pull a 50-50 spreadsheet. These will be automatically calculated and give an overall score. And this is also automatically calculated for them. And it's populated. At that point, the principal calls the teacher in for a second time. Remember, they've already called them in and talked to them about their proficiencies on domains 1 through 4. And before the end of the school year, now they're calling them back in the fall, sharing their overall student growth evaluation and overall evaluation grades. And they sign off on that and send us the information in our department. We plug that information into Skyward, and it's transmitted to the state, because the State Board of Education has to receive a report on teacher evaluations by Christmas time each year. Notice too that the rule has come into play on performance pay, and this is our first year of performance pay. We're going into the first year. And you'll see that in just a little bit when we talk about the ratification of the vote that the employees just took on performance pay. That was one of the elements in there. But the ratings that the teachers get on their evaluation will now help determine if they're on a performance pay scale of whether or not they raise a level, or if they have highly effective, then they would raise a level plus get $350. And so that would go into effect July 1st based on, that's if you approve the ratification vote, that would go into effect based upon the 13-14 data. We're running 1 year behind on the data. And that's to make sure that the data is completely in calculated correctly. Any questions that teachers have regarding their data or whatever is in. So we're running arrears on student data towards performance pay.
Ms. Dean, 3 years is the maximum.
Yes. At the,
After the third year, that one falls off and then the
Right.
new one would come on.
and we're very, understand, we do know that sometimes teachers have to take some time off during the school year. They may be out for 2 months based on maternity leave or surgery or something like that. We do have years where we tell them that you get no student growth for this particular year because we know that you didn't have full capability to make that teacher effect in the classroom. And so what we'll look at is the years prior. So we're making sure that they're not held accountable for something that's, a life circumstance. Beginning in the year 2016-17, not this coming year, but the year after, because we are settling for 2 years right now, but we will begin a negotiations period then and for every year thereafter, determining the amount of the performance pay, and that would be based on budget, pretty much like what we did this year. We have this much money to spend, let's see how it washes out. What will effective be worth, what will highly effective be worth? Or mainly it'll be highly effective. Any questions? Yes.
I had seen that there's a bill introduced that was going to limit the amount of the student growth portion of the evaluation to 1/3. Do we have any sense of whether that's got momentum behind it?
It does seem to have some momentum, and they've divided the evaluation up into thirds, basically, the student growth portion and principal evaluation of the domains. And so it has some potential. Whether it will be signed into law this year, in time to do this year. Because May the 1st, when the legislation ends, and then the governor has so long to, I just don't see it affecting this year.
Whatever it does, we know how to go back to the drawing board. We've been there before. Any questions, any other questions?
Mr. Stacy, if I could, a couple comments real quick, since I've been part of the work as well. Several decision points along the way, and the board has been involved in all those decision points. Race to the top, some districts didn't sign on, that did give us $1.2 million. So the board approved that. The union did not. We appreciate you guys supporting that effort, initiative. It gave us lots of funding to participate in a lot of these activities. From the beginning, I know the board has this mindset, as well as Mr. Hastings. It was all about equity. How are we going to make this fair for all teachers? From the first rollout of the new evaluation system, the word has been fairness. So we tried to work with our teachers. You heard the blueprint process. For us, that's one of the most rewarding things, is to sit down with teachers and work side by side with them on a blueprint, looking at curriculum, looking at their content, and you can see from them there's mutual respect across the table because their content is being recognized. In other words, we've taken a very difficult situation, multiple demands because of legislation, and made the best of it. To the point that the state has asked our team to present at the last conference, workshop, our plan and what we've done over the last 4 years. I would characterize it as working in a spirit of cooperation and collaboration across the board. And that goes along with the board. The board has you've had your ear to the ground to hear what teachers' needs are. So you've come back to us and said, how about using this platform? I've heard from this teacher, let's look at this. And Mr. Hastings, when we signed on to CFAC, there were only about 20 districts involved in CFAC. So Kathy says we're up to upward of 60 plus. We were at the table from the very beginning, knowing that the hard to measure courses, the content that was not going to be covered in the item banks, we were at the table. Again, the board supported all that. You approved all those TDEs. Mr. Hastings was at the forefront of that and making sure that we were there. Why? For fairness and equity for all of our teachers. You know, it's no wonder that our teachers would have concerns about all this. No wonder whatsoever. Could there be some frustration as well at the teaching ranks? Absolutely. We recognize that. But due diligence on the part of this team, the part of the superintendent, the part of this board, to make the best of the situation and provide the fairest possible evaluation system, that's what we tried to do. So you saw it all laid out, the process. What I try to do is connect the dots and give you the background information and all those decision points along the way that you've been a part of. So we appreciate everything the board has done. Obviously, this team has worked extremely hard, and this district does work in a spirit of cooperation and collaboration, and you're to be commended for your efforts as well as Mr. Hastings and the rest of the team.
I may piggyback.
Go right ahead. Yes, sir.
If I may piggyback on that just for a moment. I went ahead and calculated what Kathy was saying about 91 tests and taking 10 to 12 hours to create a test. And this is just the beginning of the process. And, you know, and then when you add in all the conferences between the administration and the teachers, it adds up. But at an 8-hour day, that would add 120 days of work. And we do not hire anybody else. We don't have another 120 days to give. And so instead of working 10-hour days like normal, they're now working 12-hour days to get the job done. And sometimes more than that. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate the instructional team and how hard they work to get this process in place. It's not something that any of us would have wanted to do, but it's legislated, state mandated, and that's our job. And our job is to educate kids to the best of our abilities, and that's what we will continue to do.
Thank you for that, Mr. Simpson, those remarks. And on behalf of the board, and I will allow, any further whatever from the other board members, but as the board chair, relay our thanks to all of y'all. Thanks to the superintendent for allowing those situations to happen where these folks could get together with each other and with the teachers and administrators and all at the schools to, in my opinion, put Levy County at the very least forefront of being prepared for this endeavor. We knew it was coming. Superintendent recognized, the board, the instructional teams recognized what was in front of them and in store for them, and got it done. Job well done. Other board members?
I agree with Mr. Turner. Thank you for all your efforts.
Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. All right, moving right along. Item E. Would I interrupt you if I got a quick cup of coffee while you were beginning your?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, I'm going to turn this projector off too. You have before you a calendar packet with calendar A and B that was created by a team of teachers and administrators. We came together and worked on that arduous task of creating a calendar that would fit around none other than the testing schedules. It was kind of funny because in our group, we were trying to determine where we put spring break, and it just wasn't looking good in March, and we thought, well, let's just look at April, and we flipped the page to April, and our template was just full of state testing. We're like, well, we're not doing spring break in April, so back to March, and we had two choices to choose from there, again, because of testing. It's getting more and more difficult to actually create days that you can even take off because of testing, as you can imagine. But we did come up with two separate calendars, calendar A and B. We always give the employees two choices. And the calendars went out to vote. And on Friday, March 13th, we got the results back that calendar A received 311 votes and calendar B 231 votes. And so it's a recommendation of the calendar committee that you adopt calendar A as the official school calendar. You'll notice on the calendars that no longer do we have 5 full days of pre-planning. Neither calendar offered that choice this year. The calendar that actually won has 3 days of pre-planning. One of the reasons for that is because we needed to put an extra post-planning day on the back end of the calendar because of the end-of-course exams that have to come into the district office, be scanned, scores need to be transformed and sent back to the teachers and put back on Skyward for end-of-course exams to go on report cards. So we're seeing a shift in the way we work and the days that we work because of testing. But it's our recommendation that you vote for calendar A.
Any questions, comments from the board?
That wasn't a big difference. I mean, it's a little closer, I think, this year. Have they given any reasons or just any discussions or anything about it?
I haven't heard any discussions. It was, kind of back and forth with this, and we're so limited with the variety that we can even offer them in the calendars anymore.
There's not a whole lot of diversity in calendars.
The calendar committee, and they provide one calendar they present would be pretty advantageous, and the other one was just a no-brainer, no tag-along. And now, with all the constraints we have, the parameters to work with them, they're too similar. So that's why I think those are.
For example, in choosing spring break for next year, we have to throw out there, look at the testing calendar, and we're looking at it, there's only 2 possible weeks to have spring break. And I think one of them is fairly. So,
Could be a problem next year.
but
I do want to say this too, and like David Delaney was saying earlier about bills that are in there. One of the big bills that people are working on is the calendar and the beginning of the school time. And the House is recommending to start like as early as August the 10th. But we don't have the power that the tourist industry has. And because the tourist industry said, no way. And so the Senate bill only lets us start like 2 days earlier. And we think we can sign off on that. So that's probably going to be it for next year, where they allow us to start 2 days earlier, because we are being dictated our start date by the tourist industry.
in other words, it's not what's best for kids.
No, it's what's best for cash flow. Right.
There are no other comments. The chair will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to adopt calendar.
Second. Motion and a second for the adoption of calendar A. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those like sign. Hearing none, motion does carry. Now that it's passed, Mr. Superintendent, was this your notification that on the 23rd and 24th, when the school was closed, that 12-month employees must work? You didn't have anything to do with that?
No, sir, I'm not going there right now. I'm worried about that next November.
He told me to remind y'all of that that y'all were supposed to work on those 2 days. Mr. Edison?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you have on your desk, looks like this. And these are all the agreements that we signed off on, the administration and the board signed off on and agreed to, and the board has ratified. And Lincoln County plowed a little bit around here. We not only have an agreement for this year, though it's rather late, but we have an agreement for next year. And may I say that at the table, we had a good spirit of collaboration and cooperation amongst each other. And it passed, I believe, a 525 yea to 6 nay. So I'd like to go through here with you. There's only one item that here that's kind of a little bit new to you, and that we agreed to reconsider. But other than that, everything in here is something that we've already discussed. Okay. Page 1 is that the board is the board agrees to cover the cost of insurance for all employees going back to January 1st this year. And any member of the team can feel free to ask any member of the team if you have any questions on here. Page 2 is that we're going to create an additional pay lane or level for those at the top of the existing schedule. In other words, there'll be ESPs will go from 12 to 13, and instructional salary folks will go from 8 to 9. And right behind that is the new salary schedule reflecting those. There's not numbers anymore, it's letters from now on. Any questions so far? And you'll also, we have 2 different salary schedules reflecting that, and then you see the ESP salary schedule. Page 3, a level increase on the current salary schedule for all bargaining units retroactive to January 1 this year. All employees, currently employed will go down one, or up one more, whichever way. Page 4. About the new salary schedule, effective starting next year. And the employees will move laterally to that salary schedule. This will be for performance pay purposes. And there were employees on the old salary schedule receiving a longevity supplement, and that longevity supplement will follow them to continue to receive supplement. And you will see that new salary schedule, and just FYI, the base up here is supposed to be $35,000. It really is, I mean, it's a placement schedule, but the base essentially is the beginning salary. That's step 2 there. Level 8. So either way you want to look at it.
We looked at what that will do to our rankings in the state on our thing.
Well, and yes, sir, and we, I don't know about overall rankings, but I do know the 35,000 beginning salary is commensurate with our neighboring counties. So it's a very big recruiting tool.
Yeah, I hadn't looked at Mr. Coward for this particular year, but history, we have been right in the middle, like 32, 34, and then the last 4 or 5 years we slipped a little, we're up to like 38, and so this will get us back to the new space.
I know the beginning salary of some neighboring counties is 34 and some change. And then on page 5, the board approved the supplement or the creation of the host advisor. And page 6, we approved the establishment of a public relations supplement. And we agreed to $2,100 for the host advisor, and we agreed to $500 for the public relations supplement. And that is equivalent to the FA Junior Chapter supplement. And then we have an agreed, you see the supplement chart with the addition of the supplements. And then we have an agreed upon differentiated, that's the differentiated pay plan, the supplements. On page 7, one of the issues within our folks that have been loyal to us for a long time, if the way the current salary structure was, if the employee came to, because they weren't able to award levels every year, so right now our current employees are 2 levels behind their years of experience. Well, the way everything was in negotiations up until this point, so if somebody comes out with 14 years of experience, they come on 14 on the pay scale, and they may leapfrog somebody with equivalent years of experience in the county. So what this is saying is that when somebody from out of district comes in, they're going to be placed on a level of commensurate experience with our current employees. Did I get that right, Amy?
Yes.
And page 8 was a language change. This was, actually this was agreed upon last year, but we never made it. It was not correctly conflict in the contract, so we agreed to open this language up, and we changed this language, and essentially, if an internal applicant goes from one job category to another job category, they retain their years of experience. And this is something you agreed to last year.
It's actually, just for clarification, it was changed in one place in the contract, but then it was referenced further down under experience credit, and they didn't, have the same type of language, and so it was confusing. We needed to make sure that it was concise, that it was, meant the same thing in both places. So we corrected it in one place but not the other. So we just did some cleanup.
On page 9 is the performance pay plan. This is for next year. We have 2 pay schedules. We have a grandfather pay schedule and a performance pay schedule. And you can see that and this all comes about if the board can afford a level increase. So if the board cannot afford a level increase, then we will negotiate a cost of living adjustment. But if you can afford a level increase, this becomes effective when you negotiate a performance incentive for those on the performance pay plan that's highly effective. And through this action, you've agreed to next year to fund the salary schedule, so the performance pay plan is in effect for next year. And it goes back to the most recent set of data, that complete set of data that we have, which will be the 13-14 school year evaluation. Okay.
Right, and also the ESP's one.
I'm sorry.
The first one up here.
Yes, and the ESPs will get a level increase as well. So based upon the employees' evaluation, so we're not able to get a level increase in next year. And this 10 is the actual page plan. So page 9 and page 10 is good together. Now, the one thing that we did agree to that is kind of new to you is back on page 9. And it's the last sentence, is to settle negotiations for 2015-16 with the exception of possible bonuses for employees at the top of the ESP and instructional pay scale. That's the numbers. We'll open it up to discuss that of a possibility for those at the top level. And that's the only new language which we have not heard. And so at this time, I'm asking, after any questions that you have on here, ask for approval of the language items and approve of the salary schedule.
I move approve.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approving the contract language. Any further discussion, any questions, comments?
I think everybody involved needs to be commended on an excellent job. It came together quite well, and a lot of good thought went into it. It was impressive the way you did that. I'm proud of y'all.
I think this is a first.
Both sides, both sides, both
Yeah.
sides. When I say y'all, I mean everybody
Right.
involved in that did a great job.
Now, I will say, we're plowing new ground here because we're dealing with a performance pay plan, which we've never had to deal with before. So I know that and we had a call with party meeting yesterday about some questions that we were receiving and they were receiving. And there's going to be questions that we have not thought about that's come up that we're going to have to continue our collaboration and cooperation on this.
But that, to me, that's the key word right there, collaboration and cooperation. You know, Sean did a good job of that going into, when you venture into new territory, 2 things gotta happen. Collaboration and cooperation. I think y'all did a great job showing that.
And the opportunity availability though is there to reopen some of that in the.
Just the bonuses.
Just the bonus that-
That's the only thing. Everything else is settled for 15-16.
Okay. So, okay, any other comments?
On the May 1st, do we feel like we'll see some people that maybe will jump over to the performance pay schedule?
Hard to tell.
Right.
They would know whether or not they're eligible for extra money.
I'm just curious to see if we'll see.
And the reason for looking we have to look that far back so that we know our budget. So we need to be able to know whether or not to recommend to you whether to fund them or not.
Hopefully with y'all efforts and stuff, we're getting more of a realization that we don't have but the one pot. You know?
I think you're right.
Okay. I appreciate y'all's efforts in that.
We need to vote on it.
Yes. Okay, any other questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those like sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Edison.
Mr. Chair, this is also part of the amended agenda for recommendations there at the tail end. And at this point in time, I'd like to recommend for administration that all administrative salary schedule receive a level increase that be retroactive back to January the 1st. But essentially what I'm going to do is recommending for administration to receive the same levels of increases as our bargaining unit employees. So recommend that administrative salary schedule receive a level increase back to January 1st of 2015. Second item is effective July 1st of 2015. The current employed personnel on the administrative salary schedule will receive a level increase in pay. And then thirdly, effective January 1st, 2015, the school board of Lee Buchanan will cover the increase of insurance for those on the administrative salary schedule. The same exact thing we're asking for employees, I'm asking for the board to consider that for the administrators.
Do I understand what we're looking for?
I'm going to approve of that.
Second.
Okay, we do have a motion for approval and a second. Any further discussion, comments, questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those like sign. Hearing none, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Mr. Edison? Sir? Oh, okay. Board policy review, chapter 6.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm going to try to get you here rather quickly. Some things I'll point out to you along the way. If you have any questions, please feel free to stop me. And I know this deals mainly with school administration and personnel department, benefits department, and there's some issues in here that Mr. Clemens probably might want to address or not want to address to you. So, first off, 6.01 is essentially, it's a nomenclature issue, who is who. It defines what a principal is, what an instructional personnel is, etc. 6.011 talks about professional ethics, and the instructional employees have a professional code of ethics. All employees have a professional code of ethics, as well as board members, and you're required to go through professional ethics training. And that's what this policy states. And this was reviewed back in 14. 6.2 is general requirements for appointment and employment. I do want to call your attention down to the bottom of the first paragraph there, where that there's not a mandate but a recommendation that where husband and wife placements in the same school be avoided when possible. It's not all in Cleveland County, it's not always possible, but it's something we try to avoid. So I don't know if that means they can't get along with what it is, but
I think it's a good policy.
at the bottom of the next page, we're in 6, and there's some letters that follow. There's going to have to be some cleanup here. For example, a notarized loyalty oath, there's a loyalty oath on the application. It's no longer a notary thing that's required. F, the TB test is no longer required, so that will be coming back to you. And J is an if needed thing. So there will be some cleanup for this coming back to you this summer. And one of the things that throughout this document that we're going to try to clean up this summer, we have tried to go to electronic forms as opposed to written forms. So you'll see some sort of language change throughout this document in the future of a board-approved process for doing things. It may be an electronic process, it may be on paper process, but if it's electronic process, like for example, that's how we do sick leave now. It's an electronic process. It's not a written process anymore. So as we're migrating to different things, those things will change. And 6.03 talks about the employment of personnel and that process and the timelines thereof.
Good door. You don't put that here down a notch or two, I got to take a
Excuse me.
6.04 talks about the certification of administrative, instructional, and non-degree vocational personnel. And there are some teaching jobs that we have in our school that through a person's area of expertise and not necessarily have a teacher. Sum it up pretty well.
Yes.
6.041 is the self-reporting rule. Basically, if there is an allegation that falls within the two categories there in paragraph 1, a person must self-report, and of any crime, whether unless it's a minor traffic violation, if they're found guilty, they have to report that. Now, the reality is that we get notification automatic, but still it requires the personnel to report that. But Ms. Dean's office gets a notification anytime there's an arrest or anything like that. 6.042, reported misconduct. On this one here, I'm going to point out to you, number 4. In other words, if an employee resigns or quits, it does not negate the responsibility according to professional practices or choice of families or member. If there's been a misconduct. So in other words, resignation does not negate the responsibility of the employee. And friend 5 over here is also, there's a reference, if there's somebody that has been reported to PPS or there's a charge, we cannot not tell. 6.05 is private instruction and tutoring. And my summary on this one is if a teacher cannot get paid for tutoring their own students, okay, they can get paid to tutor other students from not their own students. Now, most people are opposed to it for free. It's coming to help. 6.06 talks about years of service. is contracts, instructional administrative personnel. And you'll see some amendments to this coming to you this summer. Print 3, print 4, when it talks about professional services contracts, those are no longer allowed. Contracts with principals and supervisors. You can see in print 2 that allows a written contract of not more than 3 years. And since I've been in Lee County, I don't know any instance where administrators have a contract of more than 1 year. 6.09 talks about resignations, and I know that's been a topic of concern before. And within the contract itself, there is a clause that, shall I say, where either party can exit the contract the first year without cause. So that's kind of a caveat to this, and that's in the statute, it's in the contract. Is that right, Steve?
I'm sorry.
That being able to get out to resign the first year of employment.
It's in their contract.
6.10 deals with transfers and that process. You just addressed this back in 2012, talks about suspension and dismissal of employees. And the corresponding policy is 6.111, the suspension of partial or indefinite. 6.12 deals with staff training. Talks about conference and training days. Is outside of the one, basically, any employee can work outside the school board job as long as it doesn't conflict with our job. Are leave of absences. 6.16 notifications of absences, and I'll summarize this one, if you want to be out, let somebody know. So. 6.17 talks about the leave application, and here again it talks about in writing, and that may change language or change words in the board approved process. And 6.18 are different types of leave that you approve, change on that, who approves what. Is what happens if absent, if you're absent, with no leave, without leave. That's what's involved. .20 is the sick leave process, and it also talks about the compensation for sick leave at the end of their employment, when they resign, or when they retire. How it's accumulated and how it's dispersed. It also has in here the provision of donating leave to another employee. So this policy as well. And that's become, quite honestly, in this policy here, we have some very generous employees. Just say that. 6.21 is terminal sick pay. Is illness and line of duty. This is something we try to avoid when we're folks sick. Sometimes act this out. .221 is workers' compensation, return to work policy. We want to get our folks back employed, and they want to be back employed as soon as possible. Healing on this one, if you have any questions. .24 is what we talked about this week. Mr. Clemens, if I'm correct, and I know we talked about it here, like the Carolyn 3. If there's an employee that's on active duty, they are compensated by us and by their branch of service for 30 days.
240 hours.
So we'll have to review this policy because it says up here in the first paragraph 17. I'm going to see 17 days. So I don't think we're moving the statute on this one. And I do know in Paren 2 here, it references Paren 2, but I think it should be Paren 3, paragraph 3. So you will see this policy is one that's on our radar to be reviewed this time. 6.25 is how vacation hours are earned and dispersed. 6.26 is jury duty. 6.27 is professional leave, or how what we consider around here called temporary leave elsewhere. And it also addresses extended professional leave. 6.28 is temporary duty. When officially assigned short-term duties away from the regular job site. 6.29 is teaching out of the field. And every year, before October, before February, every time somebody comes to you, you'll notice on the approval, if they're not in the field, that declaration will be there for you. And teaching in field and what those qualifications are, what that means. 6.291. 6.30, we just went over this right recently. This is assessment of employees, and we saw a lot apply right there today. 6.31 is definition of age and volunteers and requirements for qualifications. And what the responsibilities are for the line. 6.32, this is in the statute. It's the principals, one under the responsible supervision of teachers in school. And extracurricular activities. 6.33, definition of qualifications. Yes, sir.
We have at all of our schools a designated time of supervision.
Yes, sir.
Does that need to be addressed in more policy, or is it sufficient with just the intent, with the signage that we use?
In my understanding, it's 30 minutes before and after the regular, before or after the school day. Now the question is, when is the school day? And I can tell you what, because we got into this, I don't know once they got into it, but we had a discussion about crossing guards and when they come on duty and everything else, when people are supposed to be there. And the school day essentially starts when breakfast starts. So 30 minutes, that's when people are required. That's when kids come on campus.
It's from statute,
Right.
Oh, it's from statute, okay.
the 30-minute time frame is.
Right.
Thank you.
But if that breakfast is not when the bell rings, it's when the breakfast bell rings. And 6.32 is pupil supervision, or that, and 6.33 substitute teachers. And 6.34 professional growth. And as always, if you have any questions or anything that you would like us to consider, I'll bring that to you for something to consider to discuss. We go through these things very quickly. Please do not hesitate to call any of us and just alert us of something you would like us to do, because these are your responses.
Questions, comments from the board? Thank you, Mr. Justin. Before we move on, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. The chair has got to discuss one little item with the superintendent. So I'll be back in 5 minutes. Meeting will come back to order, please. Mr. Nathan, that agenda.
That's the right here. Got folded under your hands.
Thank you. Sorry about that, folks. Approval of the minutes, March 10. Ms. Pam, are there any changes?
No, sir.
Okay, chair seeking a motion.
So moved. Second.
Have a motion and a second for the approval of the minutes of the March 10th meeting. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those like sign, hearing none, motion carries. Consent agenda. Pam, looking at changes.
Yes, sir, on the front of the consent agenda, the word family medical leave under consent agenda general items is misspelled, so I'll be correcting that. Then looking on the consent agenda itself, on the first page, under general items B, family medical leave. Number 2, Cecilia Jackson is a custodian at Bronson Middle High School, not food service. So we'll mark that through and change it to custodian. Under D, professional leave request. Number 2, the FBA bargaining conference. That language should say FBA bargaining conference March 30th and 31st, 2015, Tampa. Sub-cost reimbursed to project number 14935. And then it lists Carmen and Catherine Duval. And that's all.
Mr. Asbell, do you have any questions, comments regarding the consent agenda?
Not want to nitpick them, but would like to know a little bit of information on the various contracts that we're looking at and agreements. Don't know a lot about E-rates and all this kind of, just a general.
Well, the E-rate, I think, Ron, Ms. Perez, covered that last.
I want to be sure, that's what I thought, but I want to be sure that was what we were talking about there. And then we have
what we were presenting last.
the various financial services and the,
Now, financial services is different. I'll let, and that's a good time. Mr. Clemens can introduce our guest here.
Yes, good morning. There's a couple contracts on the consent agenda and the additional consent. One for financial services from Jim Gallahan, who's with us this morning, answer any questions you may have. Also, a place with a summary in front of you, showing you what we're attempting to do with the refinancing of our bonds. There's his contract, and there's also the contract with bond counsel to help us through this process. Essentially, what we're trying to do is refund and refinance our racetrack revenue bonds and our COPs. And Jim has been a friend of Levy County over a number of years. He helped us with the initial issue in 1995, and then in 2005 we refunded those issues. He helped us with that, and now he's stepped up to help us do this again. Basically, I'm going to let him speak and kind of explain some of the process to you, but what we're trying to do is capitalize on the low interest rates and refund and refinance these bonds so that we can garner some more money out of them in case we need it for our project. Just trying to look ahead a little bit, make sure we anticipate our needs before we get there. So, Jim.
Thanks, Bob. Good morning, board members, chair, superintendent. Pleasure to be back in Levy County. I've had a number of conversations with your staff and superintendent since late January. I gave Bob a call and brought to his attention that the two issues you have outstanding later this year have a call provision. The call provision allows you to prepay the bonds at par, the remaining balance. So as you know, interest rates are either record lows or record lows by some indices. So the board has the ability to lower its interest rate quite a bit and realize savings. And in these conversations, I was made aware that you have a large project that's underway where some of your, you have to give up part of your $2.5 million money for the next 3 years. 2 years after this fiscal year, that presents some interesting issues cash flow wise. So not only can you lower your interest rates, we can restructure the new loan to refund the old one to give you a little debt service relief in the first couple of years of this. By deferring the principal for a couple of years, paying only interest, that frees up some cash flow that helps you get through this period. Also, another benefit is there may be a shortfall on this project. You might have to pick in a little cash. By refunding this is a perfect opportunity to add some new money to it. It's easier to do it all at once it's more difficult to come back later as far as selling the additional, bidding the additional money later would be more difficult with the bank. You have additional cost, additional time. So that's another benefit, lower interest rate, possibility of cash flow relief, some new money. And also we have the issue with at Williston Middle School, which is under your COP program. It's my understanding that with this new project, you will not need that facility. So now's a good time to work with your bond counsel and your staff to remove that facility and hopefully have enough remaining schools under that COP master lease to secure a new loan with the bank. Now, in the past, the school board has gone to the bond market, which is a public offering, and is sold in $5,000 increments to various investors, individuals, banks, insurance companies. In the current market, it's more cost-effective on a smaller loan of 20 years or less to go directly to a bank. So as your financial advisor, I would prepare a bidding document with a financial package with all the information on the school district and the project and the refundings. And I would send that to approximately 20 banks, maybe as many as 25. We'd make sure all the local banks had access, other Florida banks, regional banks, national banks. So of those 20 to 25 banks, I would expect to have maybe 5 or 6 banks turn in a bid. And as you probably are aware, the banks are sitting on a lot of cash, earning nothing. They're paying you nothing for your money. So banks have been very aggressive on these types of tax-free loans. So the process, if you approve it, we would spend the next 2 to 3 months, well, actually the next couple months, working on your plan of finance. How much money do you need? I understand this bids will hopefully be in the next month or so. Do we need to add money to that, to the transaction? Of the 2 transactions, the easiest one to add money to is the revenue issue. So we can add up to $1.9 million. You have the ability to increase the amount outstanding, which is about $1.6 million, up to $3.5 million. That's what the maximum you can borrow under the special act, where you share the money with the county. So we can squeeze another $1.9 million, and that's not as project-oriented as the COP issue. The COP, you have to have you're leasing a facility, it has to be a designated project with a footprint. And so it's a little more difficult. So if all you need is $1.9 million, then we would recommend just adding that to the racetrack revenue issue and extending the life of that issue from 15 years to 20 years. You would pay 5 additional years to net additional $1.9 million. And then on the COP issue, yes.
But on the racetrack issue, it's never to our advantage to ever pay that loan off. Is that correct? That's correct, because
and I don't know the exact wording of that special act. It's been 10 years since I looked at it. And in most cases in Florida, once a debt's paid off, that money goes back to the county. Right. And you're fortunate. Most counties split that money evenly with the school board, but you get most of it.
Yeah, don't put that in the paper.
Yeah. So,
I'm going straight to the webinar.
so yeah, to answer your question, it's best to leave that outstanding as long as possible and for the benefit of the school district. So if you approve of this financing today, we would continue to work with your superintendent and staff and your bond counsel, putting together a plan of finance, determining how much is needed. And we would bid this out in early June. Actually, we bid it out mid-May. The proposals would be due early June. Banks will hold their rate for 30 days, and we would close this in early July, maybe as early as July 2nd. That would put you into next fiscal year. You'd only have 2 more years of revenues to deal with to give up to the state on that special act. So that would be the timing.
Would would you explain to the board how your contract works like this?
Yeah, the superintendent said, well, you know, you fill in the blank on the length of time. It could be a year, it could be 3 years, it could be 5 years. Some districts hire me for 5 years, and some are 3 with a renewal provision. But basically, I think the superintendent was concerned, you know, what's the annual fee? Well, it's not an annual fee, it's like a spigot. If you need my services, you turn it on, you pay for the services, you turn it off. It's not an ongoing fee. So I would only be paid for these 2 issues. And Bob can tell you over 10 years, since the last time I was paid an issue, I've kept in contact with Bob. Whenever he had a financial question, I'd be there to answer, and I'd come by occasionally and visit. And I never billed the school district for that time. So, you know, unless there's a specific financing or a special study that is more formal, there's no ongoing costs for my services. And there's also a 60-day cancellation on either side. So, and the same would hold true with bond counsel. Where, you know, I don't know what they put in for their life. I forgot what. Do you remember what they
I
had?
think it was the same thing.
5
It
years.
works the same way, basically.
Yeah. So you only pay them once you have financing, but not on an ongoing retainer.
So go over one more time, we're going out for bid on what, with banks?
Yeah, we have 2 existing bond issues, or one's a bond issue, one's a COP issue. And we would bid both those out to banks for 2 different brand-new loans with the bank. And these are not considered a public offer, they're either private placement or a direct loan with the bank.
Or what's the total for those 2?
Well, currently, you owe $1.6 million on the revenue issue. So if you bump that up to the maximum of 3.5, the net 1.9 million, that issue would be 3.5. On the COP issue, your balance is approximately $5,750,000. So if you added a couple million to that, that would be $7,750,000.
What I'm seeing on this sheet, I think Mr. Clemens provided us with that, in both of these instances, with the revenue bonds, it's a lower interest rate,
That's correct. Yeah.
and also with the bonds, it's also, I mean, the COPs, it's a significantly lower interest rate.
Yes, it's a shorter loan. If you stay with a 10-year loan, some of the variations that we discussed, even if you don't add new money, if you want to get a little cash flow relief for the first 2 years, the COP would be an 11-year issue. And what that would do is you pay interest only for 2 years, and that would free up $530,000 per year that you would have paid in principal. So you'll be amortizing the principal in year 3 through 11. So even if you don't add any new money to the COP issue, in the next 2 years, your debt service would be reduced by $1,060,000. So that gives you some relief during this 2-year period where you're giving up that $1.5 million to the state. So that would really be the scenario. It would be probably the 11-year on the COP if you don't add any new money to it. And then in the case of the racetrack issue on the 20-year issue, I think we did the same in my analysis. I have it right here. I think we gave a little bit of debt service relief in the first couple of years on that. So that's one of the benefits I mentioned, that we can structure the payments on the new loan to help you get through the next 2 years.
I think it's a wise move. You know, we've talked about it several times that we're losing that money, but we still have the same expenses going on. This is a wise, economical way to come up with working capital we need. From a business aspect, we're crazy enough.
Any other comment? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Of course, you'll be seated out there if something else comes up in the course of our remaining conversation.
Oh, sure. Yes, sir. Thanks.
Some of us are a bit slower. Mr. Asmus, did you have any other comments, questions?
Yes, sir. I'm good.
You good to go?
I'm good.
Mr. Howard?
I'm good today, so mine have been answered.
Ms. Wilkins?
So, did that tie into, this other, the bond council with the, Bryant Miller Olive?
Right.
Okay. So that's.
It's a separate contract because those people prepare all the documents, the signed documents, and they do the disclosure council and all that stuff, so it's a different arena than what he does for us.
They're lawyers.
Right, it's just all the paperwork and the legal stuff. Where is this firm from? I've never heard
They're
of
from
it.
Tallahassee. They helped us with the previous issue, so that's why they're, George Smith has addressed the board on several occasions. He's been here several times.
Mr. Chair, if I could perhaps assist a little bit on that. My attorney, councilman with Chip Cobal, has experience with bond issues. He reviewed both of these contracts, said that they were standard for the industry. There were some others that he was familiar with. So we have taken a look at the contracts themselves are pretty usual. And bond counsel is a specialized line of work. Regular walk-around attorneys like me don't do that. So it's a good idea to get a specialized firm from Tallahassee.
Great, thank you, that helps a lot.
Is that the difference in you being an attorney or an esquire?
Just people with big egos call themselves esquire.
These are walking around. Ms. Brookins, was that all? Yeah, you didn't have any others?
That's all I have. Thank you.
The chair only has one that regarding, and it's the same old usual thing with the general items on the addition to. 1A 17. And as per 6.091A, which we just referenced through Mr. Edison, was a acceptable reason given to the superintendent for this resignation.
No, sir. I guess there just comes a point in some people's life where they just don't want to do anything. I guess it's about all I can say.
You know, this is, we had a number this year, and I do recognize that they don't want to be there, they don't necessarily want to be there, but it still sticks to all these folks that we give jobs to for either a short amount of time or a lengthy amount of time, and just all of a sudden decide they don't want to work anymore, and we're supposed to be okay, and the children are supposed to have to deal with the, us finding a replacement for the remainder of the year.
I think we have, I talked to the principal, I think we've got a super sub down there that's been working wonders.
But that's the good part of it. And with that being said, the chair will entertain a motion for consent agenda. Oh,
Yeah, no questions, comments.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
we have a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda. Any other discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those like sign, hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Pam, Mr. Superintendent.
One thing that I put at each of your desks, up there, is the top 10 and the balance sounds for our schools. And, these are students that work very hard and diligently to obtain these type of honors, and I'm so very proud of them. And I thought maybe that you would like to know who they are, and not necessarily for the area that you cover, but that you would like to congratulate these students on being academic scholars. And some of them I'm just so very proud of. And I don't mind mentioning to you that Jolie Birchfield was one of the first ones that I gave a STEP scholarship to back 7 or 8 years ago. These STEP scholarships are picked by the teachers and the student, and they're people that promise to not get in trouble, to never be arrested, to never use drugs, and yet they can't really afford to go to college. Their families, they struggle with that. And so Julie Birchfield was one of the first ones I gave one of those to. And also in Cedar Key, I gave one to the Epperson young lady there at Epperson. And I'm so very proud of their accomplishments and what they've done in school. But anyway, I thought you would like to send out congratulations or congratulate that you had the opportunity. Testing has begun, and there's some angst that goes along with the new test and the new format, and how it's done, and new criteria. But I've heard mixed results. Some teachers are struggling with it, and some are satisfied that they prepared their students well and doing a good job. So the future will tell, but I think our staff, Justin, our staff try to prepare our teachers to prepare the students. Everybody has worked diligently on this, and I'm very satisfied that we are up and running and doing what needs to be done. Of course, y'all know, y'all went to Tallahassee 2 weeks ago and visited, and I spent 3.5 days up there last week. And one of the things that we did, and Mr. Ted and Mr. Edison came up on Thursday, and we met with Violet Brown and the DOE building staff, and we updated them on where we were construction-wise and with special facility funds and money, and that was, I felt like a very productive conversation that we had with that department, and especially with Violet Brown. And so I'm anxiously looking forward to moving dirt and laying blocks in Williston, and I think everybody is. The sessions with DOE and FADS about accountability, I don't think anybody wants to not be accountable for the job they do. Everybody wants to be accountable and work very diligently towards that. But as was stressed earlier, how to do that fairly and equitably with teachers is a challenge. And the idea behind it, to pay better teachers more money for doing a good job, that's an admirable concept. But how to do that realistically with, across the state, I don't know, 90,000 teachers, a lot of teachers, and how to do that the right way and to be fair with everybody is indeed a challenge. But not to be left undaunted, we have worked on that continuously, but I can tell you that in Tallahassee, one way that I put it is that when the creek starts to dry up, the animals begin to look at each other differently. And in Tallahassee, a lot of people are looking at everybody a little differently than they used to. A lot of concern about what we're doing with accountability. And I'm not just talking about tests, I'm talking about the whole concept. And that's the problem I have with it, is I believe in testing to know how your kids are doing and where they're at. I believe teachers should be accountable, and I believe administrators should be accountable. But all the changes coming at this one apex at a time is concerning. When you have a whole new format on how to give a test, and new standards that you're teaching to, and new evaluation systems that you're going to be evaluating teachers on, and performance pay, and all of that coming at one time, to me, is just ludicrous. If they would just spread it out, that would be good. The big discussion on school grades and district grades, and whether to put it in advance for a year or not, I can tell you nobody will give you a direct answer on that. There is seems like there's more flexibility with the House than there is with the Senate, but until the rubber hits the road and we know where we're at with the test and all, I don't think you're gonna get a straight answer on that. But I will tell you that from a local standpoint, with all of the changes going on and all the angst that's being created, do we have concerns about filling future slots for teachers and administrators? Yes, sir, we do. And when you look at, for example, the University of Florida puts out maybe 3 science majors that want to be teachers a year, and maybe 6 English teachers. That's not many. Now, we do have a little bit larger buy-in too with elementary from different colleges and universities, and now that the community colleges are now picking up a 4-year slot for elementary. You know, that's going to be a help, but the high school level is going to be a challenge to get all those slots filled. The state does have a lot of race to the top money left that they have to get rid of quickly, and so they will funnel that. The idea is to funnel that back into the districts for technology, which we probably give us probably 2 weeks to write a plan, and then you know, and then we'll have to put that into effect. And that's one of the reasons for the difference between the House budget and the Senate budget on the 100 million, 80 million that the governor recommended, House recommended 80 million, and the Senate recommended 0. And part of that is buyout between the race and the top money to do with it. So that's something that will come up. I do want to make mention, and some of you have asked me about it, is the grievance that the union filed sometime back in the fall about the workman's comp issue and the pay, sick leave bank pay. And it took a while to get the arbitrator to make a ruling on it, but he did process a ruling which he sided with the administration that you cannot use sick leave bank money for the other third. Workman's comp pays 2/3 of a person's salary. That other third is not to be used by sick leave bank. The employee may use what they've earned in sick leave time or personal time to make up that 1/3, but after that's gone, they do not get paid out of the sick leave bank for that other third. Questions, thoughts, concerns?
Can I give them an update on our project in Wilson?
Please do.
Just FYI, we met with, we had last week a meeting with, a mandatory meeting for the site prep work for all those contractors, and they're figuring out that the GMP has kind of been broken into 2 parts, the site prep work and then everything else. And so we had a meeting with all the site prep folks last week, and so they have that working together. I will be meeting with ACA and another mandatory meeting for everything else at Williston High School Auditorium on Good Friday morning. And so we'll be down there at 9 o'clock and for that meeting, and then Mr. Ted and I will be meeting on April 1st for the bid openings.
Of the site work.
Right, of the site work. And then their proposed date, we looked at the timeline that ACA has for this project. If everything goes accordingly, and we believe it will, they'll be tearing some dirt up on May 4th. And the timeline is to have the school completed in June of 2016. And the contingency plan Everything, they're starting, basically, they're gonna start with the cafeteria, move forward to the administrative office, and move this way to the classroom wings. The last building that will be started will be the gymnasium. So if there's any delay of anything, the gymnasium will be the last one complete. But all of the rooms where kids are gonna be, and all the rooms for the construction, they are slated to be done in June. That's the timeline.
June 30th. So they'll be bringing you 2 GMPs, one for the site work and then one for the building construction. And I will say this, when we met with DOE, we were asked about 3 times in a row, in case you're not ready for students August the 16th, what's your next plan? I said, there is no other plan. We will be ready. And they guess, well, but if you're not, what you going to do? No, you don't understand. We are going to be there, and we will have students and teachers in that new school in August the 16th. And that's kind of how we left it.
Not to contradict the 2 GMP comment, but I've spoken with Todd about that, and he says they're going to hold off and get the 1 GMP for the total price, and that would be the second board meeting in April. But the time frame is still to break ground on May 4th.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
they want to come to you with just the 1 price.
Okay, very good. That's good. Anything else?
Okay. Delaney, do you have anything for our edification at this time?
Just on the issue of the arbitration, I have a lot of help from folks who work with me on that to help explain our side of the story, our view of events, particularly Mrs. Turner was a very instrumental witness in that process.
She talks so pretty good.
I'll pass that.
Yeah, please. Ms. Brookins, do you have any comments?
Just that, I appreciate the information that, we get from administration, Carol's email about no wins with FBLA, and Rosalind's emails, about the contest and the fair, and Lady Learning Academy, and I really do appreciate this top 10 list and the Val and South, because I think that is critical. Sometimes we just know the top 2, but I think all the students are important, but it's good to, see the other ones, and I know Carol's proud of Kelly, and Kelly works with me, and I'm so proud of her too, and I didn't know that she didn't tell me, so I think that's wonderful.
She would never tell anybody.
Yeah, so, just all the positive things that we're doing in the schools and the things that are happening, I think that's great, and thank you very much for giving that to us.
Good.
Thank you.
That's all.
Mr. Collins?
First of all, thank you, Ms. Brookins, for heading up the fair. So we did buy an animal, so we bought Blake Holman from Bronson. So good little kid with a nice pig. So, and also want to invite everybody out to the Arts Festival, which is this weekend. So come get some grilled shrimp or a burger if you'd like from the PTO booth where I'll be. And I just appreciate everybody. So appreciate all the board members going to Tallahassee. So,
I just want to take this time to publicly say how much I follow Mr. Brookins. And the governor will at some point appoint somebody to fill that seat. Nobody will ever replace him. I knew him as a little boy, one capacity. I knew him as a teenager in another capacity. And I knew him here. And I greatly appreciated the man. I was thrilled to death to sit beside him and work with him so often. And a lot of times he would say stuff like, I ain't the smartest one, when in reality he was by far the smartest one in the room. And those kind of things and these little comments, and I cherish every minute of it. Couldn't say I agreed with him 100% of the time, but nobody agreed with Phil about 100% of the time. But he had a way about it that brought out the best in his students, and I think he brought out the best in this board, and I will miss him dearly. And just publicly let it be known how much I thought of him and how much I think he did such a great job. And I'd like to see us make a point of letting Ms. Philpott know how much that man meant to us. And we will desperately miss him. Other than that,
That is one of the points that she made to me was how much he respected the board. Enjoyed being part of it.
he absolutely did, and it was great to work with him. He was one of a kind fellow, and thoroughly miss him and thoroughly enjoy him. And didn't want to upset anybody, but I shed a few tears, and I'll miss my friend.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Edwards. And I'm sure each one of us in our own way has our own appreciations and depreciations as it relates to Philpott. Very close personal friend as well as professionally, all the way back to being principal at Wilson High School, pretty much during his real heyday when he was winning those national championships for the district as well. So again, I appreciate those comments, and I'm sure each board member and others have their own remembrances and recognition. Board, the chair only has a couple of things. For one, I want to be, on behalf of the board, give our congratulations to all those Valley South and top 10 persons in the district. So, Mr. Superintendent, if you would relay that, in some way, shape, or form, that the board is really appreciative of the efforts that those students. To get to that level, it's not just pass your test, go home and do your homework. Get to those levels, there's that extra sacrifice that you do instead of cruising town. Well, I guess cruising town is an old thing that we used to do something. But whatever they do instead of the work, they're not doing it. They're paying their attention to their studies.
I will say this, the paper does an excellent job of recognizing those people too.
In fact, your top 9 of 10 from Chiefland are going to be on our front this week. One young man was too shy.
Yes,
I appreciate it.
But I want that list.
yes, thank you very much for that. And Ms. Pam has indicated that our portion of the flowers is $20 a piece. We'll take care of that. Ms. Brookins has indicated that it's $50 a piece.
I did not.
Oh, you
I did
didn't?
not.
Oh,
No.
well, the chair stands in amazement or whatever then, but how much Ms. Brookins do we owe, or are you going to get that separately? Or?
She's going to get the invoice.
Ms. Pam will get the invoice, okay.
Sure, you didn't
Correct.
get too heavy on that one, did you?
That's one of the $7 hogs.
That was $7, great.
Okay.
It's for the kids.
Is there any other business to come before the board at this time? If not, we will be adjourning to Wilson Middle School, correctly? Or both of them are on here.
Yeah, go to Wilson Middle School and then run by Wilson High School.
Okay, so it would be,
No executive.
no executive, that's on here, but we need to scratch it off. I think we took care of our legal business. With that part. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And at this point in time, we will re-adjourn to